Welcome to episode 48 of Motivating Mondays, a weekly podcast and YouTube series dedicated to help Canadian job developers and other employer engagement professionals develop the tools, resources, expertise, and network to excel in achieving sustainable employment outcomes for their clients or students. My name is Christian St. Cyr, National Director of the Canadian Job Development Network, and today we're going to take a deep dive into how local employers are being impacted by global trade. While this is causing inflation, higher input costs, and reduced profits, often the biggest challenge is a worried consumer who isn't willing to make a big expenditure, or change jobs, or even go out for a nice dinner. It seems like uncertainty is the biggest barrier in the labor market these days. Now, last week, Stats Canada released the February Labour Force Survey, and according to a headline published by CTV, Canada's job loss, a bloodbath. Now, all hyperbole aside, economists were expecting the country to create 10,000 jobs last month, but instead we lost 84,000 jobs. This is one of the worst single-month job losses in decades, if we don't count pandemic years. Employment numbers like these might prompt the astute job developer, like yourself, to wonder how employers are approaching hiring, if not the economy itself. Now, we've really been on the cusp of a recession for a couple of years now, and it's gotten so much worse in the last year as the new administration in the United States began implementing and talking about implementing and putting out social media posts about a variety of new tariffs. Now, I read about this all the time, and even from my standpoint, it's hard to keep track of what's been threatened and what's been implemented and what's potentially going to be implemented and how all of this impacts Canada's economy. According to the numbers, we've definitely felt the impact. In the past year, we've seen a steady erosion of jobs in the manufacturing sector, losing 60,000 jobs in just the last 12 months. Adding to the problems, we have the U.S., Israel, Iran war, which has significantly increased the price of oil and other types of energy. So in preparing this, I looked at how much oil travels through the Strait of Hormuz, which coincidentally is the most common Google search in the last week. And it turns out approximately 20% of the world's total liquid petroleum, roughly 20 million barrels, passes through the Strait of Hormuz, making it the world's most critical oil choke point. But that's okay. We only use oil and gas to transport, everything. So with rising higher gas prices, uncertain trade, global conflict, and now we're getting ready to renegotiate the trade agreement between the United States and Canada and Mexico, that could potentially unravel every element of our economy. How does all of this impact local employers? Many of us are not likely working with international manufacturers or importers or exporters or steel producers or oil companies. Does this have an impact on the restaurant down the block, or the big box retailer, or the smaller IT company, or the independent trucking company? The challenge is that even the smallest companies need supply inputs. This might be materials that are delivered in a container, but it could also include napkins and dishes and toner and even office supplies. Everything is getting more expensive for employers. In a typical year, employers can withstand a 2 or 3% increase in costs, but a flat 25 or 35% increase in tariffs is massive. And while inflated costs are a major consideration, the biggest factor impacting local employers is, as I said at the beginning of this, uncertainty. Employers are reluctant to hire or expand their operations or try new things. The approach nearly everyone in the world has adopted to the U.S. administration is keep your head down and hope that it all ends soon. As much as employers are slow to hire, slow to fire, that's a difficult environment where projections for the next 10 years call for 35% of new jobs to be created through economic expansion. In our employer engagement roles, it's critical to understand how employers think and the decisions that they're making. Now, for these sorts of questions, I always turn to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and they just recently released a study titled A Divided Year, Small Business Performance in 2025 Under the U.S.-Canada Trade War. The study notes that small businesses entered 2025 already under the strain of persistent high costs and slowing business dynamism. It reveals that at the close of 2025, businesses fell into two categories: those who reported a good year and those who reported a bad year, with very little in between. Factoring in those who reported both a good and a very good year were 37% of respondents. Another 35% of respondents noted they had a poor or very poor year. Contrary to the myth that only large companies are being impacted by trade, only 35% of companies with 0 to 4 employees reported a good year versus 42% of those with 50 to 59 employees, or 50 to 99 employees. That reflects the tighter margins and limited buffers that make smaller businesses more vulnerable to rising costs and sudden disruptions. When they examined why small businesses had experienced a poor year, 67% noted reduced profits, 63% said because of higher expenses, and 65% identified reduced revenue. A much larger portion of businesses who experienced a poor year versus a good year noted that increased debt was a major factor for them. When they looked at businesses that had experienced a good year, many of the same factors came into play, just to a lesser degree. Only 44% of businesses were still having a difficult time with higher expenses, 26% with reduced profits, and just 16% with reduced revenue. The distinguishing factor for businesses that had reported a good year were that 33%, or 1/3, were struggling with supply chain issues. These are difficult times, and many employers are looking for someone or something to blame. I was listening to the radio the other day, and one employer called in, and he commented that the cost of regulations of new employees are so expensive that instead of hiring people, he was just going to call them contractors and relieve himself of the regulatory burden and the costs. Now, that certainly creates a multitude of challenges, not the least of which is the violation of employment standards and tax regulations, but it speaks to the frustration that many employers are struggling with. When the CFIB asked employers what approaches the federal government should adopt, this is what their top 5 responses were. Number 1, actively work with the U.S. to reduce trade uncertainty, 69%. 2, continue to reduce internal trade barriers, 61%. 3, provide broad-based tax relief for businesses, 54%. 4, reduce regulatory burden and red tape, 53%. And finally, number 5, expand trade opportunities beyond the U.S. market. That was cited by 48% of respondents. They also asked businesses what the federal government can do to make their circumstances easier during these tariffs. And so their suggestions are, what can you do for us? Well, 1, provide broad-based tax relief measures, such as a reduction in the small business tax rate and or employment insurance premiums for small businesses. Number 2, prioritize CUSMA, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement, negotiations to restore stability, reduce trade uncertainty, and protect cross-border supply chains that small businesses rely on. Next, ensure counter tariffs are redistributed to affected businesses through straightforward and accessible reimbursement processes. 4, remove interprovincial trade barriers so that Canadian businesses can more easily diversify their operations across the country. And the final one that they recommended to government, reduce regulatory burden from implementing a 2-for-1 rule. So when 2 rules are eliminate 2 rules for every new rule that is implemented, making regulatory modernization a priority. I agree, businesses are overregulated, but I think applying a simple rule like that is a huge challenge. But let's put that aside for a second. Tariff uncertainty, global conflict, inflation, and economic uncertainty aren't just bullet points that come up in our news feeds. They are factors that are forever changing our economy and also our labor market. This is actually one of the reasons why we've launched the summer labor market series, Canada Strong, 16 Ways Trade is Changing Our Labor Market. So we're inviting dozens of speakers from nearly every province across the country to provide insights into what governments, business, educators, and communities are doing to make the labor market less reliant on the United States and more Canada-focused. The tariffs may end after all of this, but we're already seeing government priorities, industries, and trade with other nations shifting away from the United States and how we've traditionally done things, and it's going to remain that way for decades to come. By the way, we've organized our summer labor market conferences into 5 separate conferences. So we have one for Alberta on May 28th and 29th, one for British Columbia, June 4th and 5th, one for the Canadian Prairies, Saskatchewan, Manitoba on June 11th and 12th. One for Ontario on June 18th and 19th, and then one exclusively for Atlantic Canada, PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland and Labrador on June 25th and 26th. Everyone who registers by March 31st is going to get a 50% discount on registration. It is actually a huge discount, so I'm just going to caution you about that. If you would like more information, just go to the Canadian Job Development Network website at jobdevelopment.org. As we move forward, what is the messaging that we should share with employers? I believe that first and foremost, we need to empathize with their situation. A study such as this one from the CFIB does a lot to help us develop a dialogue with employers. We also need to frame our discussions as financial benefits. We certainly want to promote traditional benefits like wage subsidy and training and working gear and workplace modifications when hiring those with disabilities. I also believe we need to have economic messaging for the benefits of hiring our clients. These benefits might include less turnover, more reliable employees who will stay longer or ones that will be more loyal. We also should highlight transferable skills, such as better language capability or a stronger attachment to the community, or transferable or relevant international education and training. By framing our job development activities in economic messaging, we're not only making the best case for our clients or for our students, we're also empathizing with our employers' challenges and building relationships. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please click the like or subscribe button in whatever platform you're hearing this on. Search for Motivating Mondays wherever you download podcasts. We'd also love if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel and or rate or review this podcast. Now, we do these sessions live and for free every Monday morning on Microsoft Teams. We have job developers joining us from all across Canada. It'd be so great if you could join us. Just go to jobdevelopment.org to learn more information. If you have any questions, you can send me an email. My direct email address is cstsear@labormarketsolutions.ca. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have an amazing week.